Thank you. I'm Jennifer Levi. I direct GLAAD's Transgender Rights Project. Those who know me know that this is my dream job, a job where we, all of us, get to use and move the legal system to secure our dreams. I started at GLAAD in 1998, a time when GLAAD had only two other attorneys, the fabulous Ben Klein and the incomparable Mary Bonato. Gary Buzik, who was apparently born working at GLAAD, had just taken on the role of executive director. GLAAD is still very much the little engine that could. But back then, our office on Washington Street had space enough to house probably half of the legal staff we have today, never mind the development, communications, and operations staff so essential to our work. So to make an event like this one tonight happen, we'd sit around a large conference table, licking and stuffing envelopes. But what we lacked in space and resources, we more than made up for in passion and heart and in dreams. When we were doing things like stuffing envelopes, we joked about getting paper cuts on our tongues, but we also had serious talks as well. Talks in which we dared to dream big about what our movement for social change and equal justice might achieve. To put those dreams in a historical perspective, I'm talking about a time when statutes that criminalized same-sex intimacy and demeaned gay people remained on the books and in force. No same-sex couples could marry in this country or in the entire world. Express protections for transgender people existed in one lone and distant state. Transgender health exclusions were ubiquitous in insurance plans at every level and in all plans, public and private. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth were harassed and subjected to violence without any meaningful recourse. Transgender youth, who faced as much and worse, were largely invisible, unseen, and unknown. We had a vibrant, loving community that could dream big, but in terms of legal protections, it was a dark time. So you'll have to excuse me when I tell you that recently it has felt like those early dreams we could only barely envision while sitting around that table stuffing envelopes are coming true. Just weeks ago, the Supreme Court, in deciding not to take any of the marriage cases that they were asked to review, increased the number of states that same-sex couples can marry to 24. That number is climbing by the day and should reach 35 very soon. As we speak, same-sex couples are marrying in Wyoming, West Virginia, Oklahoma, North Carolina, and beyond. This was the possibility we envisioned when we dared to dream of bringing a marriage case in Massachusetts in 2001. But there's so much more this year that makes me feel like our dreams are coming true. Last March, Zach Pakinen, Ben Klein, and I brought a case on behalf of our client, Ricky Bates, who was denied gender transition-related surgery under Mass Health, our state Medicaid program. That case was part of a broader effort to challenge health insurance exclusions across a range of programs. We set our sights on Massachusetts after toppling the federal Medicare exclusion, as well as those in Vermont and Connecticut. And then Governor Patrick announced that instead of fighting, Mass Health would get rid of its exclusion, and the Division of Insurance would not permit private insurance plans that discriminate against transgender people's health care needs to be sold in Massachusetts. Yes, it felt like a dream. Around the same time, after months of advocacy by GLAAD attorneys Vicki Henry and Allison Wright, The Department of Youth Services adopted the most progressive policy of its kind in the country, stating that the gender identity and sexuality of all youth in state care has to be affirmed. That, too, felt like a dream, especially as it came on the heels of the Massachusetts and Connecticut Departments of Education working in collaboration with GLAAD to write and adopt school guidelines affirming transgender and gender nonconforming youth. The real-world implications for these policies are huge. They mean that transgender girls and boys must be affirmed as the people that they are. They mean that transgender youth in state care must be provided with the clothing and health care they need to live their lives fully, and that gay youth must be allowed to develop healthy sexual and emotional relationships rooted in their same-sex desire. I could go on and on about the rapid pace of progress just this year alone. But what I really want to talk about is what this transformation means for how people in the LGBT community, particularly young people, envision the possibilities of our lives, and how these new dreams are radically reinvigorating GLAAD's work. Tonight, I want to talk about the ways in which the work we now rightly celebrate has ushered in a new world, a new vision for our movement, one that goes beyond anything any of us really could have imagined when we shared those dreams we had just 15 years ago. The brave steps of prior generations to create community, to come out to friends and family, to demand attention to the AIDS crisis, changed the world. These hard-fought, courageous efforts allowed many of us, not all of us, and not yet enough of us to be sure, but many of us, to create families, enjoy professional success, gain legal recognition of our relationships, and obtain medical care that serves our most basic needs. But what I now realize is that achieving the dreams we only dared to dream when I started this work was not an end, not even close. It is simply a new beginning, a beginning that gives way to new and bigger dreams. It is just fact that because of GLAAD's work and all of our collective work, it is no longer possible for children to grow up thinking that because they may be queer, they cannot marry the person they love. Because of our work, transgender young people have hopes of being able to live in the world as their authentic selves. But I believe there's an even greater reward, and that is this. These achievements allow our children, but really all of us, to imagine a world that is even safer, more just, and more free than we ever could have dreamed before. And that makes it all the more urgent that we continue the work, but also that we redouble our efforts and commitment to it. Tonight, I want to talk about these new dreams, Dreams 2.0, next generation dreams, whatever we want to call them, and put them in the context of the legal work we're doing right now to achieve them. First, family. GLAAD has rightly received a tremendous amount of local, national, and international attention because of our groundbreaking marriage work. As the marriage equality work stabilizes, we know we have exponentially more work to do to continue to realize our dreams of protecting, but also dignifying all families, however they're formed. Families headed by same-sex couples, to be sure, but also those headed by transgender parents, unmarried people by choice and happenstance, three-parent families, donor-involved, donor-anonymous, and so much more. This transformational work includes reviewing and overhauling, when necessary, archaic and outdated laws, and working closely with family attorneys to ensure that transgender parents in contested custody cases don't lose relationships with their children because of bias and misunderstanding. And we continue to work on behalf of non-birth parents who risk losing relationships with their children when birth parents use biology as a trump card. Thanks and congratulations to Jansen Wu for defending the rights of a New Hampshire non-birth mother. For defending the rights of a New Hampshire non-birth mother treated like a legal stranger by the family court, but who was later recognized by the state Supreme Court as the full parent her child knew her to be. So too with our health access work. As we knock down discriminatory barriers, we know we are only beginning to see the full scope of the work we have yet to do. Yes, a growing number of government agencies agree with us that transgender health exclusions are impermissible. But now our healthcare systems have to catch up. Because even without these categorical exclusions, we know that transgender people risk biased decision-making. And even once we ensure coverage for basic care, we have to ensure that there are doctors, hospitals, and beyond who stand ready to provide this necessary care to our community. Our healthcare access work also includes our efforts to get insurance to pay for the treatment of lipodystrophy, a disfiguring condition caused by early HIV medications. And with the help of our legislative allies and all of you, Massachusetts will become the first state in the nation to require this coverage. And finally, I want to speak of the work that remains to be done for our youth. Our youth, of course, need to be environments free from bullying, harassment, and violence. But anti-bullying legislation is far from a goal or an end in itself. Our dreams are of a society that celebrates, loves, and admires the beauty and diversity of our youth, whether lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, genderqueer, questioning, non-binary, and beyond. We must realize and not just dream of a world where society recognizes that all youth, including very young children, have diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. I dream of the day when there are no coming out days, not because we're post-gay, but because we no longer presume children are heterosexual or cisgender. GLAAD is on its way to securing this new world we dream of for our youth. We recently launched a campaign to increase the number of LGBTQ student clubs in middle school. While 52% of high school students in Massachusetts finally have access to these clubs, 94% of middle school students do not. That is far too many and needs to change. In Maine, getting a statewide law to expressly protect transgender youth in schools just opened the door to possibilities. And when the High Court agreed with us that those protections must guarantee a transgender girl's full inclusion in school life, in bathrooms, overnight field trips, and in using shower facilities, only then could we really envision a safe and inclusive world for genderqueer youth. We also know that our most marginalized and vulnerable youth, those who are out of home, homeless, in foster and congregate care, must be central to our work. And it's why we won't rest until health, sex, and sexuality education includes information that reflects the needs and reality of all youth. Working at GLAAD since the 1990s has been a privilege. But it also means that many of the young people whose interests we seek to protect were born long after I graduated from law school. And I have to thank my clients for keeping me up to date on what it's like for millennials, as well as the high school, college, law students, and others who work and volunteer at GLAAD. Yet distant as I am from the experiences of our youth, I'm not insulated from the problems that remain. I'm a GLAAD attorney. I'm also transgender. That means that I know both the mechanics and the indignities of discrimination. When I travel, which I do a good bit, I'm regularly pulled out of the security line to be manually frisked. Too often, That experience comes along with a humiliating public discussion about my gender and body parts. Just using a public restroom on any given day, I hear comments that are snide, offensive, or outright cruel. I've had security called on me and been asked to leave a department store when simply trying on clothes. I have to anticipate the possibility that the most ordinary activities of my daily life may well spiral into an ordeal. All of which is to say that I know all too well that experiences of exclusion, humiliation, discrimination, and violence do not change just by the passage of a law or by a court's interpretation of it. But I also know that we, all of us as individuals who face derision, stigma, and bias, are stronger when we stand together and fight to make change. When I came on board at GLAAD, few could imagine what's happening now in West Virginia, Idaho, or Oklahoma, let alone at the Maine and New Hampshire Supreme Courts. It was beyond my wildest dreams that our work would enable a 74-year-old transgender veteran to get gender affirmation surgery that would be covered by her Medicare plan. But that is exactly what has happened. None of these dreams could have come true without you. Young people most obviously dream about what their lives might look like, but we each come to our daily and lifelong struggles armed with the power to dream. In the words of the great organizer and civil rights leader Ella Baker, the power of imagination makes us infinite. With your continued support, and all of our continued imagination, GLAAD will keep right on fighting and struggling alongside you until the world we live in matches our dreams. Thank you.